On a freezing winter night in the quiet fields of Montana, a lonely veteran opened his door, and what he found standing in the snow would change his life forever. Two children trembling in the cold, a loyal German shepherd at their side, and a moment that felt less like chance and more like a miracle. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from today? And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much for being here. Winter in rural Montana had a way of swallowing everything in silence, turning the entire landscape into wide sheets of white and muted gray. The sky that afternoon hung low and heavy, the kind of sky that warned of a long storm ahead. The nearest town was miles away, and the ranch, small, isolated, and surrounded by rolling fields that disappeared beneath drifting snow, felt like the last warm point on a frozen map. The wind cut through the valley in sharp currents, rattling old fence posts, carrying the sound of distant coyotes, and brushing aggressively against the wooden walls of the house. Inside that ranch lived a 45-year-old former U.S. Marine Corps veteran, a tall and broad-shouldered man with the unmistakable bearing of someone shaped by years of discipline and hardship. His weathered face carried natural lines at the corners of his deep-set blue eyes, the kind of lines carved by both harsh sunlight and long nights awake. A neatly trimmed beard framed his square jaw, and the faint scar across his right eyebrow, a thin, pale mark, hinted at a story he rarely spoke about. His hair was short, dark brown with threads of gray spreading from the temples. Though strong and resilient, there was a quiet solitude in the way he moved, a reflective stillness that came from living far from crowded places, far from the noise of his old life. Out here, he preferred the gentle routines of the ranch, feeding livestock, repairing fences, and tending to the land. His loyal companion was a 5-year-old German shepherd, a large, sturdy dog with a dense tan and black coat, strong posture, intelligent brown eyes, and an alertness that never really left him, even during naps. He was trained well, calm, obedient, attentive, but he also had a soft, nurturing side that showed whenever someone was vulnerable or scared. The veteran often said that the dog had a better instinct for people than he did. That afternoon, the dog lay curled near the fireplace, occasionally lifting his head at the sound of the wind brushing against the windows. The storm grew heavier as daylight pushed toward dusk. Snowflakes came faster, thicker, sideways. The German shepherd suddenly raised his head, ears standing tall. A low rumble formed in his throat, not a warning growl, but a sound of concern. He walked toward the front door, sniffed the edges, and then barked, a sharp, insistent bark that echoed across the wooden interior. The veteran looked up from the workbench where he had been repairing a broken latch. "What is it, boy?" he asked, though the dog had already turned, barking again before running to the window. His tail stood stiff, his stance focused. The veteran didn't hesitate. He grabbed his thick jacket, an old olive-green military field jacket faded from years of use, pulled his gloves on, and opened the door. The cold struck him immediately, biting into his skin and burning the inside of his nose. The dog rushed out first, paws sinking deep into fresh snow, nose pointed toward the gate near the end of the long driveway. The veteran followed, boots crunching through layers of untouched white. As he stepped closer to the gate, he saw movement, small, shivering shapes barely visible through the barrage of falling snow. Two children. A thin boy around 10 stood holding the hand of a much smaller girl. The boy wore a bright but faded yellow shirt beneath a torn brown jacket far too thin for the temperature. His hair was dark, messy from wind, and his cheeks were red from the cold. His eyes held a mixture of fear and determination, the gaze of someone trying to stay strong for someone else. The girl beside him wore a loose green shirt under a frayed coat that barely reached her waist. Her small hands trembled inside sleeves too long and too thin. Her light brown hair was tangled, snowflakes clinging to it like crystals. Both children looked exhausted, their clothes damp from walking through snow that reached nearly to their knees. The boy swallowed hard before he spoke, his voice barely audible through chattering teeth. "Sir, I can work," he said, pushing the words out as though each one cost him effort. "We just need somewhere warm, just for tonight. I'll do anything. Please." The veteran stopped a few feet away, stunned not by their appearance, but by how long they must have been out here in the freezing cold. The girl clung tighter to her brother's hand, eyes wide and tired. His German shepherd stepped closer, gently sniffing the children before sitting beside them, a quiet gesture of reassurance. The boy looked at the dog, surprised. He's nice," he whispered. The veteran nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside him. The storm was getting worse, the wind slicing across the open field with an unforgiving edge. Leaving them here, even for a moment, was impossible. He opened the gate and crouched down to meet their eyes. "You don't need to work for a place to stay," he said, his voice steady but warm. "Come inside. Both of you. You're freezing." The girl blinked, still unsure if she should trust him, but the presence of the calm, gentle dog seemed to ease her fear. The German shepherd nudged her hand with his nose, and she instinctively reached down to pet his head. The veteran guided them toward the house, keeping them close as snow piled quickly around their legs. Once inside, the warmth of the fireplace wrapped around them like a blanket. The veteran helped them remove their wet coats, set 2 chairs near the fire, and placed thick blankets over their shoulders. The dog lay down beside the girl, pressing his warm body against her trembling legs. For the first time since arriving, she exhaled a shaky breath and relaxed against him. The veteran kneeled nearby, studying their thin frames and tired eyes. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "No need to be afraid." The boy nodded weakly. The girl leaned her head against the dog. And in that small, warm room, as snowstorm winds howled outside, the first fragile thread of something new, something like hope, began to weave itself between the 4 of them. The storm finally softened by early morning, leaving behind a world of white stretching across the Montana fields. The veteran began his day as usual, rising before sunrise, but this time when he stepped into the main room, he saw the 2 children still curled beneath their blankets near the fireplace. The boy slept lightly, his expression tense even in rest, while the little girl rested peacefully, with one hand gently holding onto the thick fur of the German shepherd lying beside her. The dog's calm breathing seemed to comfort her, as though she had found the only place she felt safe in days. When the veteran placed another log onto the fire, the sound stirred them both. The boy sat up quickly, alert and nervous, his dark, wind-tangled hair falling across his forehead. The girl rubbed her eyes, her slender shoulders still trembling slightly from the cold that had settled into her bones. The veteran knelt beside them, his deep-set blue eyes steady and kind, despite the stoic mask he often wore. "You don't have to worry," he said gently. "Today, if you feel strong enough, you can help with simple things. Nothing heavy, just small chores." The boy nodded, trying to appear braver than he felt. The girl pressed closer to the dog, who wagged his tail once as if promising he would stay with her no matter what. After a quick breakfast of warm oatmeal and toast, the veteran helped the children into some old jackets he found stored in a trunk. They were still too big and worn, but far warmer than what the children had arrived in. The boy's thin frame made the sleeves hang awkwardly, while the girl's small figure nearly disappeared in the long coat, the green of her shirt peeking out from underneath. When they stepped outside, cold air rushed toward them. But the sun had broken through the clouds, glittering across the snow like a field of crushed diamonds. The German shepherd walked ahead, his paws sinking deeply, ears constantly turning in every direction, scanning the quiet ranch with natural protectiveness. The veteran showed the boy how to gather small branches that had fallen near the fence line. These would be used to start fires more easily. The boy worked slowly at first, stiff from cold and exhaustion, but determination pulled him through. His hands, small and reddened by windburn, gripped each piece of wood with growing confidence. Meanwhile, the girl was given the task of scattering feed for the chickens. She hesitated at the barn entrance, startled when a rooster crowed loudly, but the dog nudged her gently forward, standing between her and the flock as if giving her courage. The girl smiled shyly and reached up to touch the dog's ear before continuing. When the veteran noticed the boy struggling with a small metal bucket of water for the livestock, he moved to help, but the dog was already there. The German shepherd walked beside the boy, nudging the bucket's handle with his muzzle to steady it, and then trotted ahead, to push closed a section of fencing to keep the grazing animals from coming too close. The veteran paused, surprised but also grateful for how naturally the dog understood what was needed. The children worked quietly but diligently. Neither complained, though the numbness in their fingers was obvious. Once the chores were done, the veteran guided them back toward the house. "You did good," he said simply, a rare compliment from a man who had lived many years speaking little. The boy straightened with pride. The girl slipped her hand into the dog's fur again, warming her cold fingers. Inside, the fire roared softly. The veteran prepared warm cocoa while the children sat wrapped in blankets. The boy watched the room carefully, his expression thoughtful, as if he were still trying to understand why someone would help them without asking for anything in return. The little girl leaned against the dog, her cheek pressed into his coat. The German shepherd stayed perfectly still, his gentleness emerging in a way that contrasted with his strong, disciplined presence whenever danger approached. These first strange days carried a quiet awkwardness, the kind that appears whenever strangers begin learning how to exist together. Yet something softened in the atmosphere of the ranch. The veteran moved with more patience. The boy spoke more than a single sentence at a time. The girl laughed once, soft, quick, but real, when the dog placed his paw on her knee, as if asking her to pet him again. For the first time in a long time, the house felt larger, warmer, less lonely. That evening, after dinner was finished, and the sky darkened behind frosted windows, the children sat by the fire and tried to dry the last chill from their bones. The veteran watched them quietly, noticing how their shoulders no longer curled in fear. They still looked fragile, still carried exhaustion behind their eyes. But something had shifted. They were beginning to feel safe. The German shepherd stretched out beside them, keeping both children within the circle of his warmth. And as the flames danced across the logs, the veteran realized the ranch no longer felt like a place meant only for him. It felt, in a small but undeniable way, like it was beginning to change. The following days settled into a gentle rhythm, the kind that felt new, yet unexpectedly natural. The veteran, observing how determined the children were despite their exhaustion, decided it was time to offer them something beyond simple chores. On a quiet afternoon, while sunlight filtered through snow-frosted windows, he moved an old wooden table toward the brightest corner of the living room, right beside the window that overlooked the open fields. The table bore scratches along its surface from years of use, but it was sturdy and warm, a good place to begin something meaningful. With careful hands, he wiped the dust from its edges and placed two mismatched chairs beside it. The children watched curiously from near the fireplace. The boy stood straighter than before, his thin shoulders no longer slumping quite as much. The girl clung to the German shepherd, half hiding behind the dog's warm fur as she peeked toward the veteran. Once the table was set, he turned to them with a small, encouraging nod. "If you want," he said in his low, steady voice, "we can start lessons. Just reading, writing, and simple numbers. It might help you later." The boy's eyes brightened, revealing how much he had missed learning. The girl looked uncertain, but when the dog nudged her gently with his nose, she stepped forward without hesitation. The German shepherd, 5 years old, broad-chested, intelligent, and soft-hearted, took his place beside the table as if he understood he now had a new job. His ears perked, and he rested his large paws neatly on the floor, ready to observe. They began with letters. The veteran wrote slowly and clearly, demonstrating strokes and sounds with patience not often associated with a man who had spent years in military training. His deep-set blue eyes softened when the children struggled, and he offered quiet encouragement rather than urgency. The German shepherd watched intently. Whenever the boy mispronounced a word, the dog tilted his head sharply to one side and tapped the wooden floor with a paw, causing the boy to laugh before correcting himself. The girl sat close to the dog, her delicate fingers curling into his thick fur whenever she grew nervous. Her green shirt peeked out from the oversized jacket she still wore, and her small frame trembled slightly each time she attempted to write a letter. Yet the warmth of the dog by her side steadied her. Whenever she hesitated, he looked up at her with calm brown eyes that seemed to promise she was safe. Gradually, her letters grew clearer, her lines less shaky. By mid-afternoon, the veteran let them rest. The German shepherd walked away briefly, only to return with a thick stick he had found outside the doorway. He dropped it proudly at the boy's feet, then nudged the girl with encouragement. Understanding immediately, both children bundled into their jackets and followed him outside. Snow still blanketed the ground, but the sun had carved paths of light across the white surface. The dog ran ahead, moving gracefully across the snow despite his size. His coat glimmered in the cold light, and his tail swept back and forth in wide arcs. The boy threw the stick clumsily at first, but the dog bounded after it with eager determination. The girl laughed, an unsteady, breathy sound that carried across the quiet ranch, when the dog returned and pushed the stick gently into her hands. For those few minutes, their past hardships melted into the winter air, replaced by simple joy. Inside, the veteran stood by the doorway, watching with an expression caught somewhere between tenderness and disbelief. For years, the ranch had been silent except for wind, animals, and the occasional bark of his companion. Now, laughter filled spaces that had long remained empty. It surprised him how much lighter the house felt, how deeply the sound of those children's laughter settled inside him. When the sun began to lower, turning the snowy fields into soft shades of gold and pale lavender, the children came back inside with flushed cheeks and sparkling eyes. They returned to the study table for a little more practice. The veteran guided them gently. The boy concentrated fiercely, pressing his lips together in deep focus. The girl leaned against the dog, her tiny hand resting on his back as she shaped each letter with growing confidence. The German Shepherd remained their quiet guardian. His presence bridged the gap between uncertainty and safety, anchoring them whenever their minds drifted back to memories too heavy for their small shoulders. As evening settled, the veteran closed the lesson book and let the fire grow brighter. He observed the children as they huddled near the flames, the warmth painting their faces with a soft glow. They still looked fragile, still carried shadows behind their eyes. But the fear that had greeted him at the gate was fading day by day. In the soft hum of crackling firewood, in the quiet companionship shared between a man, a dog, and two children beginning to heal, the ranch felt alive again. For the first time in years, the veteran felt the weight of loneliness lift, replaced by the unfamiliar but welcome feeling of being needed. As winter slowly loosened its grip on the Montana plains, the ranch began taking on a gentle calm that felt different from the cold stillness of earlier months. The snow was still thick across the fields, but the sunlight stayed longer each day, reflecting warm gold across frozen ground. Inside the house, the veteran noticed how the children were no longer moving with the timid stiffness of their first days. Their steps had gained a quiet confidence. Their shoulders no longer curled inward. Their laughter appeared more frequently, soft but unmistakably real. The veteran continued teaching them every morning, but the afternoons were reserved for light chores. At first, he guided them closely, making sure nothing overwhelmed them. Over time, however, the children began performing tasks on their own, learning from both practice and observation. The boy, though thin and small for his age, showed a precise and careful way of doing things, folding blankets neatly and stacking them properly beside the wooden cabinet. His hands were still small and roughened by cold winds, but his movements had become deliberate, as though he took pride in getting things right. The girl, delicate and quiet, enjoyed helping with the chickens. She walked slowly toward the hen house each afternoon, scattering handfuls of feed with a shy little smile, while the German Shepherd stood guard nearby, his alert posture ensuring nothing startled her. The veteran watched all this with a mixture of surprise and admiration. While he was used to working alone, he found that sharing simple tasks with the children gave the long winter days a warmth he hadn't felt in years. When it came time to stir warm feed for the livestock, the boy insisted on helping. Though the wooden stick felt heavy in his hands, he pushed through with determination. The girl took her time wiping the dining table after breakfast and dinner, standing on her toes to reach the far corners. The veteran never had the heart to tell her that some spots she wiped still remained dusty. What mattered was her effort, her eagerness to contribute, to belong. The German Shepherd remained their silent protector. Whenever the wind grew strong and cut bitterly across the yard, the dog moved beside the girl, placing himself between her and the gusts. She always reached to hold on to the long fur along his neck, letting his warmth shield her. One afternoon, when they were crossing the wooden bridge over the narrow irrigation ditch, the boy slipped on a patch of hidden ice. Before he could fall, the dog lunged forward, gripping the boy's jacket sleeve with surprising gentleness and steadying him before anything worse happened. The boy startled first, then laughed nervously and wrapped both arms around the dog's neck. Every time the children had to leave the house, even for simple tasks like gathering snow to melt for water, the dog used his powerful nose to scan the air. He checked the wind, the tree line, the barns, and the open fields before allowing the children to walk further. His instincts, a blend of training and natural vigilance, acted as an unspoken promise. Nothing would harm them as long as he was there. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon and painted the snowy fields with soft, amber colors, a knock sounded at the door. It was rare for visitors to appear unannounced, especially in winter. The veteran opened the door to see a neighbor, Mr. Harold, a man in his early 60s with graying hair, heavy boots, and a coat dusted with snow. He had a broad face with gentle wrinkles, and his eyes, light blue and tired yet kind, reflected the years he had spent raising cattle on his own land. He was a simple man, quiet by habit, known for helping when needed and never asking for anything in return. "I was riding past and saw the smoke from your chimney," Harold said, his voice warm but gravelly. "Thought I'd check in. Haven't seen much of you this winter." The veteran stepped aside, letting the neighbor see inside. Harold's gaze softened as he spotted the children sitting near the fire, the boy polishing a wooden spoon and the girl brushing snow from the German shepherd's fur. The dog remained calm but alert, watching the stranger with steady eyes. "Well," Harold chuckled, adjusting his scarf. "Looks like your place has got more life in it than it used to." His smile widened. "Good to hear kids laughing around here." The veteran nodded, a subtle but genuine expression of gratitude crossing his features. Harold didn't stay long. He never lingered anywhere that wasn't his own barn or pasture. But as he left, he cast one more approving glance at the children. "You're doing something good," he said simply. "It shows." When the door closed, warmth filled the room in a different way. Not from the fire, but from the realization that others could see the change as well. The children, hearing Harold's words, exchanged small, proud smiles. The boy puffed out his chest just slightly. The girl reached out to hug the dog, burying her face in his fur. The veteran looked at the scene quietly, feeling a shift inside him that he hadn't expected. These small tasks, the growing courage in the children's hearts, the constant devotion of the German shepherd, they were not just making chores easier. They were building something much deeper, something like a family. Winter eased its hold on the Montana landscape with a slowness that felt almost deliberate, as if the season itself were reluctant to leave. But each passing day brought clearer skies and longer stretches of soft sunlight that melted the edges of thick snowbanks. The air, once painfully sharp, carried a gentler chill now, and the wind sweeping over the ranch felt less like a warning and more like a reminder that spring was near. With this change, something inside the small house began to shift as well. The children, who had once entered the home trembling with exhaustion and fear, now walked through the rooms with a newfound ease. Their smiles came more freely. The boy's shoulders no longer tensed at every unexpected sound. The girl, once shy and quiet, had learned to hum softly while helping with their chores, her voice fragile but sweet, like the early notes of birdsong before dawn. Their cheeks grew rosier, their steps lighter, and the spark in their eyes brighter as the days warmed. The German shepherd, always near them, seemed to sense their transformation. His posture remained vigilant. After all, years of instinct and training could not be undone. But there was a softness in the way he curled beside the children at night, or the playful energy with which he nudged them outdoors to chase sticks or roll snowballs. His dense tan and black coat glistened beneath late winter sunlight, and his calm, intelligent eyes followed the children with a devotion that went beyond instinct. It was affection rooted in understanding. One evening, as daylight faded into a soft indigo glow and the house grew warm from the crackling fireplace, The girl settled on the rug beside the dog. She pressed her cheek against his thick fur, her small fingers gripping gently around his neck. Her voice, barely louder than a whisper, carried a truth that silenced even the wind outside. "It feels like a real home here," she said, her words trembling not from cold, but from emotion. For a moment, she stayed there, quietly holding onto the dog as if he were an anchor, preventing her from drifting back into the loneliness she had known before. The veteran stood nearby, one hand resting on the mantel of the stone fireplace. The firelight cast warm tones across his weathered face, softening the sharp edges shaped by hardship and years of solitude. Hearing the girl's words struck something deep inside him, a place he had long kept closed. He remembered long nights watching snow fall through windows that reflected nothing but silence. He remembered the quiet ache of knowing no footsteps would echo through the hall except his own. But now, laughter and small voices filled the empty spaces. The house, once quiet to the point of aching, had become something living, breathing, warm. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, one curled against the dog, the other tucked beneath thick blankets, the veteran walked down the narrow hallway toward a room he had not opened in a long time. Dust floated in the air as he pushed the door open. The room was plain: wooden walls, a small window, and a floor that creaked softly under his boots. It had once served as storage, filled with tools and blankets he had never used. But tonight, it felt different. It felt like possibility. He spent the next hours clearing the space, stacking unused crates against the wall, sweeping away dust, and opening the window to let the cold but fresh air in. His movements were slow but steady, with a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. When the room finally stood open and empty, he brought in 2 small beds with wooden frames, simple but sturdy, and layered them with warm blankets. He placed them near the window, letting the faint moonlight touch the corners of the new beds. By the time he finished, the house had grown silent except for the gentle breathing of the children and the occasional shifting of the German shepherd guarding them. The veteran stood in the doorway of the newly transformed room and felt something rise within him, something unfamiliar yet grounding. Pride, maybe, hope, surely, and a sense of belonging he had never expected to feel again. The next morning, as dawn broke across the ranch, painting the snow with soft shades of gold, the children stood outside beside the veteran and the faithful dog. The cold air nipped at their cheeks, but instead of shrinking into themselves, they leaned forward, eager for the day. The boy's hand rested lightly on the dog's back. The girl held onto the veteran's sleeve with small, trusting fingers. For a long moment, they looked out across the wide field that stretched before them, vast, open, and filled with the promise of new beginnings. The German shepherd stood tall, tail sweeping the snow in slow, content arcs. The veteran breathed deeply, feeling something warm settle inside his chest. What stood there that morning was not just a man and 2 children. It was not just a dog and a ranch. It was, unmistakably, a family taking shape under the early light of spring. Sometimes, God works in ways we cannot see. A man who had lost all sense of family found 2 children who needed a home, and 2 little souls wandering in the cold found warmth in the most unexpected place. None of them planned it. None of them were searching for each other. Yet somehow, they were guided to the same doorstep on a freezing winter night. That is how miracles often happen, not through lightning in the sky, but through small acts of kindness placed in our path by God's gentle hands. A door opened, a heart softened, a new family was formed, And maybe in your own life, God has placed people or moments like that too. Moments that seemed ordinary at first, but years later, you realize they were miracles wearing simple clothes. So today, whatever you're going through, remember this. You are not walking alone. God still works, still heals, and still sends unexpected blessings when we need them most. Just like the veteran, the children, and the loyal dog, sometimes God brings the right souls together to remind us that love can rebuild anything. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so more people can feel this warmth and hope. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide you through every season of your life. Amen.